Welcome to House Money, the podcast that cuts through the noise for buyers, sellers, and agents along the Wasatch Front and beyond. Together, we dive into unfiltered, no-nonsense insights to help you win in today's market, whether you're buying your first home, selling smart, or stepping up as an agent. No fluff, just real strategies that work. This is House Money. Welcome back to another episode of House Money. I am your host, Rychen Jones. I'm a realtor here in the Salt Lake City area, associate broker, and this episode was not in the rotation of the episodes that we had planned. This is an emergency podcast with my good friend Cambria Kem, who we'll introduce here in a minute here. But there is a crisis going on in real estate right now, and it has nothing to do with commissions, and it has entirely to do with communication. And I wanted to bring Cambria on, a good friend of mine, because I think she can speak to the crisis that is communication in real estate very well with her background. So Cambria, welcome. Thanks for jumping on, and thanks for doing this with me. You were like, what are we doing here? No, I think this will be a lot of fun.
Super excited. And I think we're really both passionate about this.
Yeah, what is today? What day is it? Today's Thursday. It's Thursday. I think on Tuesday we were having this conversation and we were both pretty fired up over things that had happened that day with some of our clients, some of our deals, some of the other agents we were trying to work with. And we talked about, hey, we need to jump on and do this. I think it's probably best that you said, hey, like we should probably take a day or two to like calm down a little bit.
Yeah, just a bit.
Yeah. Sometimes I still think we're going to be fired up about this. By the way, this may be an episode that if you're an agent, maybe rubs you the wrong way. I don't care. I'm tired of it. So we're just going to call out what we see, call out bad behavior, call out behavior that needs to be better. And if you're offended by that, good. So before we do that, before we start offending people, Cambria, tell us a little about yourself and maybe where you came from prior to real estate.
Okay. And this is probably why I get so fired up about this topic to begin with so I've been in real estate. Let's see, it'll be 6 years in August when I got my license. Wow. I don't know. I don't like when people say I'm new, I'm old, I'm tenured. I just feel like it's how you do business, right? My background is really in just customer service management, but prior to real estate, I was a marketing director for a functional medicine clinic, and I really liked what I did. But I've always wanted to be in real estate. It's just, it's a jump. And so here I am now, but I think this is what really gets me going on this topic is that coming from a customer service management background, I'm just going to call it like it is. This industry, a lot of times there's no professional background. They just don't, right? They get into the industry. They may either be young or maybe they were stay-at-home parents or whatever their background is. It's not hard to just know basic customer service and make sure you're following up with your clients quality over quantity, because long-term it makes such a difference. And we're really setting the tone for our own industry. And that's the part, right? Who wants to be embarrassed when you introduce yourself as a real estate agent and then somebody's had a bad experience with that? Customer service being the biggest piece of that, it's just every single person counts. And it's super important to make sure that you're following up with your clients, you're, being held accountable, you're doing the things you need to on the background, even though no one's watching you, because we don't have managers. We are our own managers.
Yeah. We don't have managers until there's an issue or a problem and our broker gets involved because we didn't do our job.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't want to be that person, right?
No.
So just make sure you're managing your clients well. Make sure you're doing the things you need to on the back end when no one's looking. It just speaks so highly of you and our industry as a whole. Yeah. And so that's kind of where I come from. And I think that customer service piece is what really irks me.
Yeah. And we've had this conversation. I don't even know. What have we know each other? 2 years, 3 years now? Like we've been having this ongoing conversation about just the lack of professionalism in our industry. Unfortunately, some people treat it like a hobby. Unfortunately, probably shouldn't do that. But I want to make sure at the outset that we're going to address here, we're not just going to like talk to agents here, but we're going to talk to home buyers and home sellers, consumers at large here as well, because you should know what your agent is doing, how well they're communicating with you, how well they're communicating with other agents. Because it does affect you as a consumer, the level or the degree to which your agent is able to communicate. And if they can't, you may want to be asking some additional questions about your agent. And we're going to share some tips and tricks that we use to help our clients in the form of how we communicate that, maybe keeps a deal together, maybe gets a deal done, maybe gets your offer accepted, whatever it may be. But again, we're also going to talk to agents and call you out because we're done. We're tired of it.
We're over it. And one of the biggest
I don't know if we can swear here or not. I don't think we're under the FCC, but I'm tired of it. I'm done. I'm done watching bad behavior in my industry because how serious that we both take it and how much we treat it as a professional career.
Well, and it's embarrassing, right? If you are in like a social setting, you know, whatever it is, a dinner or whatever, and someone's talking to you about their bad experience, the last thing you want to do is talk bad about your industry. It's not professional. It doesn't matter what happened. You want to be proud about it. And I find myself lately hearing these horror stories, and my response is always, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, you've dealt with that. I see that too. And I think in any industry it happens. But my biggest piece, and you'll probably talk about this, is interview your agent. Just because they're a family friend or a neighbor, don't feel obligated with anyone that you know to utilize them as your agent for representation. Grill them, interview them. You're hiring them.
I think
So
if they're a personal friend or family member, you owe it to yourself to grill them even more to make sure that
100%.
they are going to communicate with you and be honest with you and make sure they are going to do the job, because you're hiring them. But man, it better not be awkward at Thanksgiving if later on either they let you down because they didn't do their job or you didn't talk about it up front.
And another tip is talk to your agent. Are they communicating with other agents? What are those conversations looking like? I mean, you think that your agent is doing everything that they're doing on the back end. And then us as agents, you and I, are seeing what's going on. And again, we're not talking about every single person out there. We're just speaking on behalf of those that this is happening with, and it needs to stop. It really does need to stop.
Let's talk about some of these specific not instances, but areas of communication, because there are different relationships here going on. Let's start with like the agent to agent communication, because I think this is where honestly the problem is. We have agents who are afraid to have conversations, or either don't know how to have them, or don't want to have them, or don't think they need to have them. This is where deals go to die, is when agents can't communicate with one another. And that's us getting in the way of our clients.
And the transaction, 100%.
So let's start first with here's a perfect example. I'm working with an agent right now on a listing I have. She represents the buyer. They sent over an offer yesterday. And we've been, I could go back and look how many phone calls and text messages we have had in the last 18 hours, 20 hours. We are in constant communication, trying to figure out how to make this work with us and our clients. She's been great. And I thanked her for that this morning. I said, hey, this is so refreshing. I've worked with her before in the past on a deal, so I know she can communicate well. And I said, hey, I just want to thank you again for communicating so well. It's so refreshing to be able to work through this together rather than feel like we're...
do that.
Yeah. Here's what she told me. She said, I totally agree. And I won't quote her text, but she basically said, I totally agree. And she relayed this experience that she had. She submitted, so we're on Thursday right now. Mm-hmm. She submitted an offer for another buyer on Sunday. She says, I submitted an offer Sunday evening. The realtor confirmed receipt. And then we heard absolutely nothing until last night, Wednesday, despite me following up every day. And that can't happen.
That's common, but it happened.
It happened. And what do we do as agents when we look like jackasses, I'm sorry, to our clients when we're trying to get information about where we're at with this offer or whatever else. And they're like, hey, where are we at? Where are we at? And we're like, I don't know. I keep trying to talk to the agent, and they're not responding back. That makes us look terrible, which I hate even more.
And honestly, Rychen, that's the part right there. That's the part. That's where you get into the weeds of, I want to look professional in my industry and as a human and as representing my client, but you're literally sitting your ass on the background and you're like, I don't know what the hell to say to my client because I'm doing everything I can. I'm hounding like a bad ex-girlfriend, this agent, over and over and over. And you're not getting a response. And then you got to go back to your client who you're consistently following up with, because I'm an over communicator. I get it. I over communicate, but I would much rather over communicate and have my client have all the information and the whys behind things rather than under communicate, because at least I know they've got all the tools that they need. But then you're answering on behalf of someone else. You don't want to say anything bad. You want to be professional, but you're still pissed. You're like, you got to be realistic. And I find myself more often than not telling my clients, the reality is, in a professional way, tactfully, I have followed up today. I'm going to follow up again. If I don't hear from them from 5 p.m., I'll be following up. Sure enough, sure shit, 5:05. Still haven't heard from the agent. Gonna reach out again. I mean, at least you're doing what we can control, right? But I just tell agents, you got to be better at communicating. My client is asking on the back end. We got to represent our business and our culture and our career in a good professional way. So I'm sure, some agents don't care to hear that from me, but you got to be honest and upfront.
And it's so hard sometimes too, because if we're on the buy side, for instance, and we're submitting the offer, man, we got to play nice. We want our offer to be accepted. We want to be the good agent, the friendly, we're trying to build rapport with the other side. And maybe they're doing a shitty job
Yeah.
of not communicating. Like this agent, they didn't get back to her until Wednesday, like 4 days later. Like she still has to play nice because she wants to fight for her buyer. And if she starts being a jerk and being like, calling out bad behavior, I mean, who knows what the agent's going to relate to their seller. And I think that's a struggle for me is I'm
Yeah.
trying to I treat this as a profession. I
Right.
treat it as a career. It's my craft. I try and be better at it every day. And when I don't have someone on the other side who's willing to do the same, I can't call them out for it because that's putting my client in a tough spot. And I'm never going to do that either.
No, you're not. And that's what makes you and sets you apart as a good agent. And as opposed, it's a game. I mean, I hate to say that, but you do have to play that game from the buyer's side, right? And I found myself more often than not trying to stay as positive as I can. I guess all we can do is control the controllables. And you follow up with your client and you're like, I'm doing my best. This is when our deadline is. I can't tell you how many times I haven't received just a response and my deadline is past like dates. And I'm over here like, at least send me a text that you're reviewing it, whatever the case may be. But the agents have to understand they've been in that boat, right? And they've been on the other side and their buyer is anxiously watching their phone for an answer because you have an open offer out there.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
With a deadline. I mean, we could talk about deadlines later on, but like deadlines, these are contracts, legally binding contracts with deadlines on them. They're not just, oh yeah, we'll get back. Well, I know deadline's at 5, but like, they don't get home from work or I can't talk to them. And what I'm about to say, maybe the, part where you start offending people. How do I say this nicely? I love that real estate allows pretty much anybody to get into it. It has changed my life. I think it's probably changed your life. And at the same time, man, if you've got a 9-to-5 job and you can't step away to call your client with an offer I sent over or, whatever else, like maybe you look at not being in real estate because that just makes it difficult. It just puts pressure on everybody if you can't return a phone call between 9 and 5.
Or if you are a high performing agent, good for you. You're doing well. But again, quality over quantity. Do you want returning clients or are you just trying to do a one and done? Because at the end of the day, it's important to make sure that you're on top of it with your client for you, but also for the other agent. And if you can't be, hire an assistant. I mean, there are so many ways, but this goes back to, I think I told you the other day, I sent you a text and I was like, there's a reason why we have managers in this world.
Yeah.
There are people that need to be managed. And if you are one of those that needs to be managed and you can't do it on your own, take a course. I don't know, figure it out. I'm not going to say this isn't the industry for you because each case is a case-by-case basis, but do something to help yourself. Hire an assistant, virtual assistant. I don't know, but it is unacceptable. There is no possible reason why you can't do the core minimum.
If you have, and now because of NAR, which we may talk about, I don't know if we'll get to that or not, but because of that, we have to have listing agreements. Obviously, you have listing agreements. We have buyer broker agreements now as well. Like, again, legally binding contract. And by the way, that puts responsibilities on us as agents, fiduciary responsibilities on us as agents, where they are hiring us to do a job and we have certain responsibilities to that client. If we're not doing our job, we're potentially, and I'm not like going to want to go like all legalistic and be like, oh, we're in breach of contract. Just do your job. Do what they hired you to do in that contract, which part of which is to communicate not only with them, but the other side to help them accomplish this. I want to go into, let's call it the black hole of real estate transactions. And on this vein of communication between agents, nothing drives me nuts more when my seller allows a buyer and their agent to come into their home, open up all the closet doors, all the kitchen drawers, look through everything, and then they leave. And then all we want to do is, hey, what did you think? How did it go? Is there any interest there? Can I get some feedback? And just crickets. That is so disrespectful, first of all, to my sellers and so irritating to me as the agent.
And again, it takes I think I timed mine the other day. I'm that person. Okay. I timed it because I always get feedback. And sometimes it takes me like a day and a half if I'm seeing a bunch of homes. Like I was in Eagle Mountain. I saw 5 homes the other day. And when you get 5 right in a row, right, it's 8 p.m. And I'm like, all right, I put it in my calendar because honestly, it's important to me because you're going to be on the other side.
Yeah.
And you want feedback. And if you're in, you've got 3 showings and none of them say anything to you and you're, those are your 3 showings for a week and a half, 2 weeks. I mean, that is so important to get that feedback. Can I just give you a story really quick?
Please. Yeah. Jump in.
So I had a townhouse for sale in Murray last year. And this is why feedback is so important. Okay. So one of the showings that we had, I requested feedback. The system does it automatically for you. And then I start hounding people. If they're not giving me feedback, especially when I'm, not getting desire in traffic and whatnot. So every showing is so important. You know this, right? Every single one. It takes one person to like the home.
It takes one buyer, right?
Buyer. Yep. So we have someone come through, couldn't get a hold of the agent. 2 days later, I am literally, go back to the bad ex-girlfriend, the annoying ex-girlfriend. I'm hounding this girl. And I finally get her on the phone. And it was a great conversation. And I'm like, I'd love to get some feedback from you. I'm sorry I'm totally hounding you, but it's important for my buyer. Could you help us out? Her response was, so my buyer was under contract with a property and there was a huge falling out because there was high methamphetamine levels in the home. So we pulled out. So my buyer is very skeptical. And I said, I totally understand that. I've been in that scenario before. What was the issue with our home? Please give us some feedback. She said, I saw some cracks in the foundation. And so my buyer immediately went to, there's foundational issues. Funny enough, I'm like, well, I totally understand that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Actually, when my client, the seller, purchased the home, they had the same reservation. And in fact, we hired a foundation specialist to come out and take a look at that on top of the inspector because she also had an issue with that and was worried. These are old. These are from the 70s. Foundational settling happens, right?
Every place in Utah.
You never know how that's going to pan out. So long and short, she said, oh my gosh, do you still have a copy of that report? I got the permission from my seller. I sent her a copy of the report. Guess who we closed on with that house? Yeah. Her buyer. But had I not called and hounded to get the information.
Annoying ex-girlfriend hounding.
Annoying.
As you put it, your words, not mine. Your words, not mine.
I will do it. I will never be the annoying ex-girlfriend, literally, but I will do it. And that is how I ended up selling that property, right? And it worked out for the buyer and the seller. But had I not gotten a hold of her, who knows if we would have been on the market months on end. It takes, just give the feedback.
Yeah. No, I love that story for so many reasons. One, I think it exemplifies you as a great agent. You are going to communicate and you are going to get that information. You are going to, fighting for your clients going to be another episode. Our friend Kat's going to be on that episode because she will fight. Literally, she will fight with her fists if she has to for her clients, which I love. But the other thing, the thing I wrote down here as you were talking about that is something that my mentor taught me very early on in real estate. He would always say, Rychen, business happens in conversation. I think that's a great example. I love feedback. You just gave a great example of just being able to talk through the feedback. You solved a problem. The example I'm thinking of is a client who they call, same thing. I had to hound them for feedback, a couple of days worth. All I want to do is ask hey, what they think of it? Even if you don't want to buy the house.
I need to know if I have it priced right, if there's an issue I wasn't aware of, or in this case, that she could have just asked me.
Yeah. If it's something that can change or not, one of my listings right now, there's homes that kind of look into the backyard. That's not something we can change. I would like to know if that's the reason why you didn't want to buy the house, because that might go to, are we overpriced and things like that. Right. But it might be hey, they didn't love the carpet or they didn't love this. So okay, we can fix cosmetics. We can talk about that.
We'll get
my point is we can hound, we hound for feedback because maybe they come back and say, hey, they actually really love the house, but man, they feel like it's a little overpriced and they would need some concessions to buy down the rate. Well, let's have a conversation about that. Let's figure out how we can make this work for her. Let's get into conversation. But if we don't ever have the feedback from somebody, and our system allows for an automatic feedback form to go out on our showing system, and you can create your own questions. My last question on that is structured as, can I give you, the agent, a phone call to ask you some additional questions about this? I love when people put yes, because I'm on the phone with them saying, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for leaving the feedback. Most agents don't. They should, but I love that you did. Can I ask you some additional follow-up questions to, some of the things you mentioned here?
Yeah.
And you're right. That's where business happens. That is the communication part of fighting for our clients, is we have to be willing to pick up that phone call and not just be well, I had 4 showings this week and only one of them gave feedback. So, okay, hey, client, we had 4 showings. There's nothing there. No one expressed any interest. Let's just keep moving on. What a crappy communication.
Right. And
the job of communicating you are doing with your...
The moral of the story is communicate. Why we're doing this podcast, just communicate. Had she called me and just had a conversation with me, right, and said, hey, my client loved the literally her verbatim was, my client loved the property. However, she had this situation happen. And because of the cracks in some of the foundation, she's worried there's foundational issues. Yeah. Okay. My thought is, I might have my buyer. This might be my buyer's home. Let me call this listing agent and see if they know anything about that. And if they don't, at least I called and checked, right? Yeah. Just communicate. Yeah. Just have a conversation.
Well, and above anything else, we're talking about feedback being the black hole. That's where deals go to die when agents don't communicate about feedback. At the very, very least, it's a professional courtesy to our sellers that you asked to come into their home. You asked to bring someone into their home. Again, you look through all the closets and drawers and all the things. It's a professional courtesy to just give some feedback on what you thought, right? You don't
Right.
have to get personal. You don't have to tell them you hated the drapes or anything like that. Just say, just give some honest feedback. I think that's like the bare minimum standard for why you would give feedback is just they allowed you into their home.
And look, I know it takes time, but you agreed to this listing and this
Yeah.
is part of your job.
Or
So
even to a buyer broker. Yeah, you agreed to help this buyer. You're showing them homes.
You agreed, and you are doing your client a disservice without doing the feedback and vice versa and calling. Yeah. Like for me, I look at that. I have to do all the job. My job isn't to just sign the agreement with my client, throw the house on the market, and hope things go the way that I want and my buyer or my seller wants. That's just not how our job is. And again, we don't have management. We don't have someone on the back end micromanaging us and saying, did you get this done today? How's this going? You got to manage yourself. And if you aren't a self-manager, this just might not be your cup of tea.
Maybe a tough place for you. Well, I think let's bridge this gap between agent to agent communication to agent to client communication, because I think there's a bridge here where this is going to apply to both those conversations. And it's this. Unfortunately, I think there are a lot of agents who either are unwilling to have difficult conversations or don't know that they need to have hard conversations. I think that agent is first. And yeah, I mean, if you're negotiating a contract, like inspection comes in and there are, things that need to be addressed, things you need to ask the seller for, man, like step up and have the conversation. Don't be like, oh man, like the agent's not going to like me. This deal is going to die. Like, again, first of all, we start creating a story in our head that's probably not real. But man, like jump on that thing, have the conversation that, hey, I don't have the full inspection report back yet. Cambria, your listing. Just want to let you know, like, we're probably going to need to talk about some things. Here are some of the big issues that came up. I'm waiting on the report. But like, man, it drives me nuts when agents don't have conversations because they're afraid to have hard conversations, especially with agents. And we'll jump into, difficult conversations with our clients here in a minute here. But comment on that if you want to.
It's not about you. It's about your client.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who cares if you don't want to have it? I don't want to wash my face every night before bed. I hate it. But it's something that needs to be done. Again, this is a commitment you made to your client and you need to have these conversations, and it's going to save you time in the long run for yourself and for your client. If you just I tell my kids all the time, not to bring my kids into this, but I'm like, you have a 5-minute tough, really hard conversation to save yourself a decade or a month or whatever of
2 nights without sleep while you're wrestling with it or whatever it is.
Literally. Yeah. Just have a hard conversation. It's not easy. I'm not taking away, the fact that sometimes it's really, you're shaking, you're nervous, you're like, what are they going to say? And like you said, the longer you sit and ponder on it, the more you start creating your own stories in your head. Pick up the phone and just be honest. And I'm always like, I'm a full transparent agent. So I am just going to tell you my thoughts. And 9 times out of 10, the other side and the other agent is just refreshed to understand and totally respects it. So it is hard, but if you can't have hard conversations, work on them, right? Take a course. I mean, we have to take continuing education all the time. There's got to be courses out there. Invest in yourself. Look for something that's going to help you. This goes back to the low entry. And I bring it up, but it's going to get brought up a lot. If you don't have a professional background and you've never been in a situation where you have to have uncomfortable conversations, maybe you invest in yourself from an education standpoint. Do what you need to do, but don't avoid it.
Yeah. And I think that's the uncomfortable truth, is that hard conversations are going to come up. You have to address them. And the sooner you do, the better it is for everybody. Again, I go back to this. Business happens in conversation.
It does.
And if you don't want to do business, then one, get out of the business. But if you do want to be here in real estate, we welcome you. I welcome you. Would love to. I love seeing agents in my classes who are like new agents or, agents, just all they're there for is to get their CE hours. Great. I come prepared in those classes to hopefully teach them something that will be useful to them. Communication being, one of the number one things. But this idea that like we can get through this industry without being able to communicate well is false. And I think, not everybody is a born natural conversationalist. I don't think I am. Some people love that. Like they're extroverted, like they can talk to anybody about anything at any time. And I said, if that's not your strength, that's okay. Have a couple of go-to questions, a couple of go-to lines, and then set your minimum bar, your minimum standard at, I'm going to leave feedback at every listing. I'm going to respond to, this within 24 hours. Whatever your standard is, just make sure you're doing it. But again, I think that leads to then hard conversations with clients. If we're not having hard conversations with our clients, especially right now in this market, you're making it difficult for everybody. And if you are a consumer right now, if your agent is not having hard conversations with you, you might want to ask why. Do they not know? Are they unaware? Maybe they're ignorant. That's not to say like ignorant in like a bad way, like a degrading way. Maybe they just don't know what to talk about, how to explain this. Let's talk about that conversation, because I think buyers and sellers right now need more guidance than ever because of high payments, high rates, high prices, low inventory, all the things we could talk about. They need guidance. They're hiring us. We better not be shying away from those hard conversations with them.
Right. And we need to have them on the beginning. Like I'm just a firm believer. Again, I know I'm an over communicator, but I like there to not, I have been in the buyer's shoes. I've had the shitty real estate agent. I did. And it was a family friend. Crazy, right? And so I think back in that scenario and what I didn't know, and just back into customer service as a whole, you're going to get more you're going to have a receptive interaction with your client, more so if you're a communicator and you're laying everything out on the line. It may not be what they want to hear, but you don't want to tell them exactly what they want to hear. You want to tell them the reality and the facts. And then you have a conversation around that, right? This is what your home is coming up as comps. I know you want this. This is what it's coming at. So I can list it at what depending on if you're the agent that's willing to do that, I can list it at, what you'd like for it. But I just want to have the conversation with you up front that if that is the case, it may sit a little bit longer. Because not only is it covering yourself, but it's also setting that expectation that if that does happen, they understand that you've had that conversation, right? And so that doesn't leave any room for confusion.
Yeah.
It's not a fun one. But again, just have it. Just have the conversation up front. If you don't know how to have the conversation, reach out to a colleague. Have, chat GPT it. I don't know. That's my favorite thing to do these days. Use chat GPT. It'll help you. It'll give you some key points.
Yeah. I want to ask you in a minute here about what are the difficult conversations with buyers right now. But let me jump in on the sell side real fast. I've had a lot of listings lately, and it's not 2021 anymore for sellers. You don't just stick a sign in the yard, throw the doors open, have 40 people show up and have 15 offers to negotiate with, and like you're done. Those days are gone. By the way, thank goodness those days are gone.
Yeah, and they've been gone a while, actually.
We have to have these hard conversations with sellers. I had this one with one of my listings that went live last night. I had this conversation yesterday with my seller. We were talking about expectations, like you're talking about, saying, hey, this house, this price point, don't be surprised if every offer we get probably is asking for some seller concessions to help buy down the interest rate. This is a first-time buyer house all day long, right? And that's not a conversation that some people want to have, because they want to I don't even know what the term is, but they want to make everything seem so rosy, like, hey, here's where we're going to price your house. It's going to be great. And they don't bother to tell them the fact that, hey, by the end of this thing, you're going to pay my professional service fee to sell your house. We're probably going to be contributing to a buyer's brokerage commission, because that's kind of how we're going right now. And by the way, you're probably also going to be contributing 0, 1, 2, 3% towards seller concessions for a buyer. I mean, this and you have title insurance on top of that. This may add up to somewhere between 7 and 9%, 7 to 9% of your sale price. I want to let you know that up front.
It's the expectation.
People start doing that. It's a lot of money, but that's what it's taking to sell a house right now. And if we're just going, oh yeah, well, you can offer, I have to be correct here. As a seller, you can offer whatever you want to a buyer's brokerage commission. You have that right. But just know that, like, in the end, this is probably going to shake out to you're going to be paying potentially X number of dollars to sell your house.
Yeah,
and
but
let's not dance around that. Let's just have the conversation right up front and say, if you're not comfortable with that, let's talk about another option.
Right. And you're setting the expectations. You wouldn't run down into your kid's bedroom and just be like, this place is a mess. You're grounded. You're going to set an expectation. I mean, you may, because it may be
dated. It depends how many times you've been down there. Yeah.
Like, what's end? I can't lie and say I've never done that. But if you set an expectation in the beginning, it's easy to hold someone accountable, right? So you set the expectation. It's not the conversation that maybe you think they want to hear, but you're also thinking for your client at that time, right? Maybe they really, and most people just want to know the facts up front, and then they're comfortable in their scenario, right? They want to know the whys behind things. They want to know the facts. They want to understand the process. And if you're truly giving them the understanding A to Z of the process, it's going to make this transaction that much smoother. And don't look at it from a place of, oh my gosh, they're not going to want to list with me, or they're going to want 1% more, or, oh my gosh, if I tell them that they may have to pay closing, maybe they're going to try to get out of your own head and stop trying to think for your client and just do the right thing and have the expectation.
We present them with the information so they can make the best decision for themselves.
Exactly. It creates such a smooth transaction in the long run. I've had situations, you never tell and I told you so, because that doesn't get anyone anywhere. But I've had situations where clients have come back and been like, I know you mentioned this, and it's still hard. You got to revisit it. You revisit the conversation. But again, turns out that's our job.
Yeah. Talk to us. Let's talk to agents and consumers right now from the buy side. What sort of difficult conversations should a buyer be expecting to have with their agent? And from the agent side, what sort of hard conversations should buyers or should agents be having with their buyer clients right now that maybe are a little difficult?
Let's see. I would say, I'm seeing more so along the lines, I'm just going to be very transparent up front of qualifying. So having conversations with people qualifying, like buyers on that end, and just being truthful and giving them the information up front. I'm, doing some marketing stuff with one of my lenders right now, and we're talking to clients, and I am just kind of rip the Band-Aid off. Like, this is what you need to qualify for a single family home. This is where we need to be with credit, whatever the case may be. I'm finding more and more that people are comfortable just having those quick upfront conversations rather than beating around the bush, getting them out there looking at homes, and then turns out they don't qualify for the property. And I'd say
you're killing somebody's dream. Yeah.
It's terrible. You get someone into a home and then they think that it's a reality, and it's not. So that's one of the biggest pieces. But again, having those conversations of, this is what we're looking at as a prequal, do you fit in that scenario? And then the other side is, when you have a buyer, just make sure they understand, how the whole process works. Like, just like when you were selling, if you're talking to someone that's sold, you can use live examples. I think live examples and stories are really big for people. It helps them relate, but making sure they understand that you may be coming up against multiple offers in certain scenarios again. And this is what that looks like. And if that's the case, it's okay. It maybe wasn't the house for you. We can only offer what we can offer. I tell people that all the time. We have only can control the controllables, right? If you have a budget and you have, X amount you can give, we've got what we can, and we do what we can. Don't beat yourself up otherwise, because if you lose out for something that we didn't have, this wasn't the right property, and we move on to the next one. So those are a couple of the things. What about you? What are you?
Yeah, no, this kind of came up in our group meeting this morning. From a buyer's perspective right now, payment is everything. We are a payment-driven society. There's no way around it. I don't care what interest rates are or what prices are. Honestly, we can manipulate prices and interest rates to ultimately get at a payment that works. And I feel like to do that, we have to be very upfront with our buyer clients of, hey, you have 5% down on a $500,000 house. That's $25,000. Let's say you have $25,000. Realistically, we have a down payment, a 5% down payment for a $500,000 home. But is that stretching our budget? Because if it is, like, do we have any more money for closing costs? Are we going to need to ask for closing costs? Are we going to need closing costs and, rate buy down money, concessions and things like that? The honest conversation may be, yes, you have done a fantastic job saving $25,000. You are to be commended for that. Awesome. Love you. We probably need to be looking in the 450 range, because
I love that. I love that you mentioned that the payment is everything. Okay. And you're right. It is. Don't focus on, it goes back to this. Know your math as an agent. Know how to do the math for your client, because 9 times out of 10, even though your client probably knows how to do the math, they're overthinking the math because it's really not that complicated, right? Yeah. But I try not to focus on the price of the home and the interest rate. What I come to my buyer with is, what is your budget on a home per month?
What is your payment?
Whether the Fannie Mae or Kathy or Bob lender is going to, approve you for $650,000, what can you afford month to month? And then you do the math as an agent on the back end and say, okay, you can do it and vary it around the home, right? This home is at this, this is what it's going to take for them to get into this. And if you can't, that's okay. Find a lender that can, so you are doing your client a service and making sure that they have the education. If you just can't do the math, but don't focus on the interest rate and focus on the home price. Focus on their budget and what they can afford.
Yeah. And I think on a different episode, we'll talk about how we search for homes, how we have that initial conversation about what they're looking for in homes, because that becomes a conversation about needs and wants and things like that. Right. And that is a hard conversation too.
It is.
And we'll talk about some tips and tricks for that. real quickly, I have my clients write down everything they feel like they need or would want in a house, their next house. I leave it open to them, like, okay, I give them some parameters, but within reason, things that
Right.
you want. And then I have them order those things and what's most important, what's the non-negotiables are going to be at the top of that list, and it's going to kind of work its way down. And I have them, because they have the list of 10 things now. I say, okay, now I need you to draw a line. Anything above that line is non-negotiable. Anything that below that line is I would love to have, but if it doesn't,
It's
I
not,
can live without. And it's a window into their mind for me of, do they have correct expectations, or do I have some more work to do there? Do I need to have some additional conversation there with them about, hey, if you want the 2-car garage and the quarter-acre lot down the street from the school with 4 bedrooms and you want it updated, this may not be in your payment budget.
right.
It may be if we go to a different area. This is all just conversation, depending on what they're looking for. I'm not going to kill anybody's dream and tell them they can't have that home. It just may not be affordable in the area they want to be in.
I like to do that.
But if I go start showing homes in the area they want to be in with all these things, like you said, they may even qualify from a lender's perspective for that payment, but there's not a chance in hell they're going to actually make that payment, because they won't ever sleep, because they'll just be so nervous every single month.
Yeah. And you risk that coming to 2 days before closing and them getting cold feet. You want to just really dial
or perhaps worse, 6 months after closing, where they're like, Rychen, I don't know what to do. We can't make
and then
this payment.
you feel for them. You know what I mean? I've talked to people that have been put in those situations, and that's just not, again, it goes to the communication. Dial it all in up front. I like how you do it. I do something similar. I just give them a straight up, what are your 3 non-negotiables? Like, what is that? That could be location. That could be like, you have to have a backyard. You don't care if it's a 1-bedroom house, but you need a backyard for your animal. Whatever it is, what are your 3? And then you go with those 3, and they try to veer and well, that's a like. You can change the paint color, you can change this, but what are your 3? Because you don't want them to get into a scenario down the line, like you said, from an affordability standpoint. That is the worst conversation to have with someone when they're already.
That's terrible.
It's terrible.
So let's finish with this. If you were talking to buyers, let's talk to buyers specifically right now. We'll finish with agents and kind of rail on them a little bit more, kind of razz them up, get them fired up to go be better. Let's talk with our consumer clients right now, buyers and sellers.
Okay.
What would be some signs, or what should they look for, or maybe ask a potential agent they're interviewing, that would help them understand how comfortable their agent maybe is with having hard conversations, how well they're going to be able to communicate back and forth? Anything that maybe you would ask if your daughter, if you were not in real estate and your daughter was interviewing agents, what are some things you would have her look for in an agent that knows how to communicate well and is willing to do so?
Ooh, red flag for me, just one off the top of my mind, is if they make commitments for reaching back out to you, like even if, there's been scenarios where I do business with like lenders and title, right? We're still all a team. And if I'm doing business with a lender and they're supposed to call a possible client of mine at 5 p.m. and they don't make the phone call at 5 p.m. on a Thursday, and they don't even, maybe something came up, but they didn't communicate it and it just goes silent, red flag. So mine is, if your agent isn't a communicator, and that's ways to be able to see if they're not hitting the deadlines, if they're supposed to be calling you, if they are not making those commitments or making a commitments and not following through on, that's a big piece for me. It's hard to know up front, right? From that perspective, because it's like, there's going to be agents that are going to tell you all the things you want to hear.
Every agent shows up really
with
agents showing up for initial appointments are like photos of homes online. They look fantastic.
Great. Yep. So I would say also throw some like hardball random questions at them and see how they answer them. If they don't know the answer, do they say, I don't know, but let me find out? Do they know the market? Can they have conversations around the market? Do they know the statistics of what's going on with the market, rather than, oh, it's good. Well, what makes it good? Yeah. Really dig in a little bit, like you're interviewing somebody at an essential position.
I think a simple question is, can you tell me about a time where you were helping a buyer and there was a difficult conversation you had to have with the other agent? Can you describe that situation for me? Like, what did you do?
A literal interview question. That is an interview question. You remember talking to consumers. Yeah. You are interviewing your real estate agent. You are hiring them to do a job. That's a great question.
That's not some MIT, weird, turn this object in your mind. What do you see? Question. It's like, tell me about it. Tell me how you communicate. How do you communicate best with agents? How am I going to get feedback on my house when people are coming through it? Again, like you said, you're interviewing them.
Exactly.
And I would say from the agent side, we're also interviewing potential clients, sure.
For sure.
And we should be upfront with, here's how I communicate best. Is this going to work for you? Hey, I have a 9 to 5 job. Let me just disclose that to you right up front. Like, there may be times during the day where I can't communicate with you right away. Is it okay if I, get back to you before 6?
And that,
You don't have to hide that. That is good communication.
Literally, you're setting the expectations. I was going to say that's my second one is ask if your agent isn't asking you how you like to communicate.
Yes.
That right there is a red flag that they may not be a communicator. Like I have a buyer right now and he works random hours, and he works at 5 a.m. So he does not communicate while he's at his job. He can't, it's not something he can do. So with that being said, I question right in the beginning of our process, he's a return client, is, okay, tell me what your hours are for work. Do you want to communicate in text? Do you like voice memo, email? I mean, everybody's all over the map, but at least that has helped us so immensely. So when I'm going back and communicating with who I need to, title, lender, the offer we have out there with the seller's agent, I can say and know, hey, my client is at work. And because he works X to, or A to Z, he's not going to be able to get back to us until tomorrow. It saves you so much time. So that is just how they're asking you, how you want to communicate is also a big question.
Absolutely. Because that's going to help you then go communicate with other agents throughout the process, whether that's buying or selling, right? Like, even if on the buyer side, you're like, hey, like, we may get a response from the sellers, like, what's the best way to catch you during the day? Or if it's like, well, I can never talk until after 6 p.m. Great. Well, now I can tell the listing agent when they send the counter offer to us, appreciate the counter offer. Just want to let you know my client works till 5:30. Exactly. We've already agreed that, like, he can't talk during work. So the earliest I can get to him is 6 o'clock, and I will let you know as soon as I can how we want to respond to this.
And from the seller's standpoint, if you're hiring a listing agent, ask them, how do you communicate with the offers? How are you communicating with the agent? Yes. Because we're finding that a lot of time they're not. If you're a listing agent and you are not answering your phone, shame on you. I mean,
I have no words.
On you. You cannot do business as a listing agent and not be taking phone calls. Now, I understand there's boundaries. This is not a 9-to-5 job, though. It just isn't. And if you think it is, you're in the wrong industry. Unless that is your boundary and you tell your seller that at the listing appointment, I work this time. But again, make sure as a seller, you're asking your agent what that looks like. And if that doesn't work for you, if I was a seller, I'd want my agent on all the time. It takes one buyer.
Yeah. And look, we get appointments and we have family obligations as well. But again, it's back to expectations. Hey, like, Cambria, you're my client. Yeah. If you text me or call me, if I can't pick it up right then, if I don't respond within like 5 minutes, I'm probably with another client or probably with my family, and I will get back to you as soon as I'm out of that, appointment or out of that family activity.
Right.
Like, people are pretty forgiving if they know that up front.
Again, setting expectations. It's really not hard.
Yeah. One question I would ask if I was selling my house to an agent, I would want to know, when an offer comes in, how quickly do you typically see it, and how quickly can you let me know the details? Even if we don't go through the offer in full, mm-hmm. I want to know when I'm going to know if we have an offer, and when you can at least share the basic details of it. We can talk about it longer at the time we can figure out, but like, I want to know. I'm selling my house. I'm stressed. I have people coming through it. I'm anxious.
Oh yeah.
How are you going to communicate with me that we have an offer that has been received, and how quickly are you going to let me know that?
No, I think that's a great one. I mean, the emotions, I always tell people this is going to be the most stressful in positive, and I wouldn't say negative, but I'd say this would be the most stressful situation that you've been put in, if not one of the most in your whole life. But it's good stress and bad stress, right? It's going to come out. Everything's going to work out, but you are going to get in your own head as a seller. You have people walking through your home. They're critiquing you on your home. It gets a little offensive sometimes. They're like, it's like, don't take it personal, but you got to make sure that you're having those conversations with the seller. So it's important that you're wrapping back around and at least saying, I got an offer. We're going to discuss all offers on Tuesday as we decided, but I got an offer.
Yeah.
So again,
and by the way, tell the buyer's agent that too. Here's when thank you for the offer. Here's when we're going to review it.
Exactly.
I will let you know, with it. If we're going to review it tomorrow at 5, I will connect with you by 7:30 or whatever it is.
Let them know. Again, going back. If you can't, text them and say, hey, we haven't come to a final discussion yet, so I need another 24 hours.
We're reviewing this offer. It's actually going a little bit longer than we thought. Just want to let you know that we're working on it and haven't forgotten about you. Like that's a 30-second text, right? Yeah.
If that,
So
but
let's finish there. Let's go back to agents. Consumers, I hope you've gotten some good tips out of here to like interview your agents and make sure you understand if you've got an agent that can communicate well. But let's finish up with agents here. Our plea to agents. 2024 was a rough year for the real estate industry. We took a beating in the court of public opinion with the whole lawsuit and commissions, and we could parse that out. We've been doing it for a year.
Yeah, dissect it.
Yeah, but here's where I come down on a non-NAR settlement sort of thing. I don't care what the settlement was. I don't even care what the lawsuit was about. The reality is we have to be better. Our industry has to be better. And I know there's, books out there and, classes out there and brokerages out there that all, tout like all the things they do to help educate their agents. But like you said, we don't have managers here. It's on us to learn how to be better communicators, to hold ourselves accountable to be better at communicators. And quite frankly, I'm so tired of agents who can't communicate or don't communicate because it brings all down. You mentioned earlier, like you're talking to someone and they've had a bad experience in the past. Well, guess what? You and I get lumped into that because they had a crappy agent who didn't do their job or couldn't communicate, or deal fell through because they didn't, get back to somebody. Well, now we get lumped in with that crap.
And nobody wants to have those conversations. Nobody wants to have those. I mean, that just puts a negative indentation on your industry, and you're left trying to find the professional and tactful words of responding.
Yeah, because we have to play nice. We have to play nice because we are trying to get a deal done for our clients.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and or if we call them out anywhere else, we go get stopped with an ethics complaint because they probably should be called out, but we can't really.
Right, and so I guess it goes back to why are you not communicating as agents? Like, I guess you go back and you ask yourself, if you're that person, we all know we are that person. Why are you not doing that? Do you need to hire a assistant? Do you just not have that characteristic? And if you don't, do something about it. You owe it to your clients and yourself. Take a training, read a course, find a book, whatever the case may be, do something about it. Ask a friend, figure it out, ask a colleague, but do something about it because we need to do better. There's a reason why things come up in lawsuits, and I don't even want to get into that, but there's a reason why things happen. Yeah. There is always a reason, and we need to do better.
Yeah. I would just, let's finish with this. Couple of tips for agents. One, let's leave feedback or give feedback on all showings. If we take a buyer through at someone's house, we owe it to the buyer or to the seller to let them know what we thought of it, if there's interest. Because again, business happens in the conversation. Maybe you don't think your client can buy the house, but if you just communicate with the listing agent, maybe there's an opportunity there. Secondly, I would say if you send an offer to an listing agent, please acknowledge receipt of that offer, and please acknowledge that, hey, we have a potential buyer for this house. We should probably be in pretty close contact. I think it can all be boiled down to the fact that if we remember that we have contracts with our clients to serve them. And part of that is, our fiduciary responsibility is to fight for them, but also to communicate on their behalf, to represent them. That's literally representing them, is communicating on their behalf. And I think if we just remembered that would go a long way. But please, agents, for heaven's sakes, just talk, just reach back out, just answer questions, answer text messages, answer phone calls. If you're busy, say, hey, I'm in a meeting, I'm with my family, whatever it is, I'll call you in an hour. I'll call you in tomorrow. I don't even care if you call me tomorrow. At least I have a response. That's better than nothing. I'll give you the last. I appreciate you jumping on. You've had such good. I'm gonna give you the last word, and then we're gonna call it a day here.
I mean, you said it better than I really could add to. Just if you're the person that's not communicating, and if you are the person, figure out a way to work on that. Whether that be, like I mentioned before, just do better and use the tools that you have readily available. Man, more than ever right now, we have tools at our fingertips. It's kind of embarrassing, right? You can literally get a degree online on YouTube right now. Just do better and manage yourself.
I love it. I don't know how they did real estate before the days of cell phones.
Oh my gosh.
But with our cell phone in our hand, literally 18 hours of the day that we are awake, there is zero excuse for not responding in a timely manner. So let's leave it there. You've been great. I appreciate you coming on. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks. Good convo.
Yeah. We'll do it again. If you're listening, we appreciate you listening. And if you've got ideas for topics or things that you just need to get off your chest as a real estate agent, or things that you think will help consumers be better, be more educated, be more successful in the market, reach out to me and we may have you on the show. So Cambria, thank you again. And we will see you guys next time.